My mother-in-law sent me daily passive-aggressive videos about being a better wife and housekeeper. She was crying when I gave her what she asked for. My mother-in-law Diane started sending me videos in January. Daily, sometimes hourly, always passive-aggressive. First one was about proper wives keeping clean houses, while I was at work, running her son's company. Next was about traditional cooking for your husband, then healthy meal prep for busy families, then how working mothers damage their children. Every single day. I asked my husband Brett to talk to her. Mom's just trying to help. She means well. She sent me 12 videos yesterday about how real wives iron sheets. So, maybe she has a point. Our sheets are wrinkled. I work 60 hours a week. When would I iron sheets? Brett shrugged. Mom stayed home. She had time for these things. By February, Diane was sending themed collections. Monday was cooking failures. Tuesday was parenting mistakes. Wednesday was housekeeping tips. Thursday was weight loss motivation. Friday was marriage advice. Always with little comments. Thought this might help. Or just saw this and thought of you. Or this reminded me of someone. I blocked her number. She called Brett crying. Your wife blocked me. I was just sharing helpful content. Brett made me unblock her. She's my mother. Be nice. The videos resumed immediately. Now with guilt trips. Sorry if my sharing upset you. Just want what's best for my son. Then 5 videos about ungrateful daughters-in-law. I tried ignoring them. Diane would ask Brett if I watched them. Did she see the one about organizing closets? Her closet is a disaster, Brett would ask me. Did you watch Mom's videos? She picked them specifically for you. No, Brett. I don't have time for your mother's passive-aggressive TikToks. She's trying to bond with you. This is how she shows love. By March, Diane was visiting weekly to follow up on her videos. I see you didn't try that cleaning hack I sent. Your baseboards are still dirty. The videos got worse. How to be a better wife. Signs your marriage is failing. When women let themselves go. Is your wife meeting your needs? Each with crying emoji reactions. So helpful. Must watch. Brett still defended her. That's just her personality. She's old-fashioned. Ignore it if it bothers you. But he wouldn't ignore it. He'd mention things from her videos. Mom sent something about meal planning. Might save us money. Mom saw this thing about working less for family time. Mom thinks you should consider it. I finally snapped when Diane sent a video about signs your son married the wrong woman. With the comment, "This was so interesting." That's when I decided to play her game, but better. I started with Brett's family group chat. Shared a video about toxic mothers-in-law. So fascinating. Really makes you think. Diane texted Brett immediately. Your wife is attacking me. Brett asked me about it. Just sharing content. Same as your mom. How is this different? It's directed at her. So is every video she sends me. Next, I started sending Diane videos. Daily, hourly, more than she sent me. Signs of narcissistic personality disorder. When grandparents overstep boundaries. Dealing with controlling mothers. Each with enthusiastic comments. This reminded me of someone. Sound familiar? Must watch. Diane called Brett crying again. She's bullying me. Brett confronted me. Stop sending mom videos. Why? She sends them to me. That's different. She's trying to help. So am I. These videos might help her understand boundaries. Week 2, I escalated. Found Diane's church friends online, started sharing videos on their pages. How to support your friend through difficult times. When someone you love needs therapy. Helping friends recognize toxic behaviors. Tagged Diane every time. Thinking of you. Diane was mortified. Her friend Carol called her. Honey, are you okay? These videos your daughter-in-law is sharing are concerning. By week 3, I found the motherload. Diane's boss was connected to Brett on social media. I shared articles about workplace age discrimination. How older employees struggle with technology. When senior workers can't adapt. Tagged both of them. Interesting read about generational differences. Diane's boss started watching her more carefully. Noticed she couldn't figure out the new software. Had been hiding it for months. Suggested she might be happier retiring. Diane panicked, called Brett sobbing. Your wife is ruining my life. She got me in trouble at work. Brett was furious. You contacted her boss? No, I shared public articles on social media. Your mom taught me that sharing content is showing love. This is vindictive. So is sending me weight loss videos when I'm 4 months postpartum. Brett finally watched all her videos. Scrolled through months of passive-aggressive content. His face changed. I watched him scroll. His thumb moved down the screen. Stopped. Scrolled again. His eyebrows pulled together. His mouth opened slightly. He kept scrolling. Each swipe revealed another video. Another comment from his mother. Another passive-aggressive suggestion about how I was failing. His face went from confused to uncomfortable to something that looked like embarrassment. He glanced up at me. Looked back at his phone. Kept scrolling. The silence stretched between us. I didn't say anything. I'd been trying to tell him for months. Now he could see it himself. All those helpful suggestions. All that well-meaning advice. 12 videos in one day about ironing sheets. 20 videos about meal prep. 15 about working mothers damaging their children. His face got redder as he scrolled. He reached January. Started from the beginning. Watched his mother's campaign against me unfold in reverse. When he finally looked up, his eyes had changed. Something guilty lived there now. Something ashamed. He tapped his mother's contact, held the phone to his ear. It rang, and rang, went to voicemail. He pulled the phone away and stared at it. Tried again. Voicemail again. His jaw tightened. He left a message asking her to come over tomorrow. His voice sounded different. Harder. Tense in a way I'd never heard when he talked about his mother. He said they needed to discuss something important. Said it couldn't wait. Hung up. Set his phone down on the counter. Looked at me. I waited. He opened his mouth. Closed it. Opened it again. That night in bed, he apologized. Said he should have listened to me. Should have taken it seriously. Should have watched the videos months ago. I accepted the apology. Then he kept talking. Said his mother probably didn't realize how it came across. Said she grew up in a different time. Said she meant well even if her methods were wrong. I felt my chest tighten. He was already making excuses. Already softening the edges. He could see the problem now. But he couldn't fully accept that his mother had been deliberately cruel. He needed to believe it was accidental. That she didn't understand boundaries. That her intentions were pure even if her actions weren't. I turned away from him. Stared at the dark ceiling. Wondered if this confrontation would change anything at all. The doorbell rang at 9 the next morning. I was feeding the baby. Brett answered. I heard his mother's voice before I saw her. High and defensive. She swept into the living room. Her face was pinched. Her shoulders were up near her ears. She started talking immediately. About Carol asking weird questions. About her boss watching her too closely. About her church friends acting strange. About how I'd ruined her reputation. Turned everyone against her. Made her look unstable. Brett held up his hand. Stopped her mid-sentence. Said they needed to talk about the videos. She blinked. Looked confused. What videos? The ones she'd been sending me. Daily. For months. She pulled out her phone. Started scrolling. Showing him examples. See? This one about organizing closets. That one about healthy meals. This one about work-life balance. All perfectly reasonable. All helpful. Brett took her phone. Scrolled through her sent messages. Pointed at the screen. 12 videos in one day about ironing sheets. While his wife was running his company. While his wife was caring for their 4-month-old. His mother's face went blank. So? Sheets should be ironed. That's just basic housekeeping. Brett's voice got quieter, more controlled. That made it worse somehow. He said she'd sent me hundreds of videos, all criticism, all judgment, all suggestions that I was failing as a wife and mother. She straightened in her chair. Said I was being oversensitive. Said blocking her number was attacking her first. Said she'd only been trying to help. Brett stayed quiet. Let her talk. I watched him watch her. Saw him notice things he'd never noticed before. The way she turned everything around. Made herself the victim. Forgot all the months of harassment that came before I blocked her. I stayed silent. Didn't defend myself. Let Brett see it play out. He needed to handle this. Needed to see his mother's tactics without me in the middle. She kept talking. About how modern women were too sensitive. About how she was just sharing helpful content. About how I'd overreacted. Brett's face got harder with each excuse. He asked her about one specific video. The one about signs your son married the wrong woman. Asked her why she'd sent that one. What was helpful about that? She waved her hand. Said it was just interesting content. Educational. Thought I might find it useful to understand different perspectives. Brett repeated the title back to her. Signs your son married the wrong woman. Asked her again what was educational about sending that to his wife. She deflected. Said I was reading too much into it. Said it was just a video. Just content. Just something she'd found interesting. Brett's frustration showed on his face. His mother's refusal to acknowledge the obvious hostility was making him angrier than anything else she'd said. Her eyes got wet. Her voice got shaky. She said I was turning her son against her. Said she'd always been a good mother. Said she didn't deserve this treatment. Said all she'd ever done was love her son and want the best for him. The tears came. Real tears. Years of practice behind them. Brett shifted in his seat. I could see him wavering. This was familiar territory. His mother crying. His mother hurt. His mother needing comfort. But this time he didn't move toward her. He stayed in his seat. Told her that her behavior toward me had been unacceptable. Said her intentions didn't matter if the impact was harmful. Said she needed to stop criticizing me. His mother's tears stopped. Her face went hard. She wasn't used to him standing firm. I finally spoke. Told her that sending weight loss videos to someone 4 months postpartum wasn't helpful. It was cruel. She looked genuinely surprised. Blinked at me. Said she'd been trying to help me feel better about myself. Thought I'd want to get back in shape. Thought I'd appreciate the motivation. I said motivation implied I'd asked for help. She hadn't asked if I wanted advice. Hadn't checked if I was struggling. Just assumed I needed fixing. Her mouth opened. Closed. She looked at Brett. He didn't defend her. She looked back at me. Something like confusion crossed her face, as if this perspective had never occurred to her. Brett suggested they all take a break, reconvene in a few days, let everyone calm down, think about things. His mother stood up, said no, said she wouldn't be disrespected in her son's home, said if this was how we wanted to treat her, she'd leave. Brett tried to stop her. She grabbed her purse, walked to the door, slammed it behind her. The house went quiet. I sat there holding the baby. Brett sat there staring at the closed door. I felt relieved she was gone, but worried this solved nothing. Worried she'd just regroup. Come back with new tactics, new ways to make herself the victim. The confrontation had happened, but nothing had actually changed. Over the next week, my phone stayed quiet. No videos from Diane, no passive-aggressive messages, nothing at all. Brett's phone was a different story. He'd be sitting on the couch and his phone would buzz. He'd read the message and his jaw would tighten. Then another buzz. Then another. I asked to see them on the third day. He handed me his phone without a word. The messages were long. Paragraphs about how hurt she was, how she'd only ever wanted to help, how she devoted her whole life to being a good mother, how she didn't understand why sharing helpful information made her the bad guy, how modern daughters-in-law were so sensitive, how she'd raised Brett to be successful, and this was the thanks she got. Every message painted the same picture. Devoted mother being punished for caring too much. Brett scrolled through more. She'd sent him 23 messages in 3 days. I handed the phone back. He looked tired. She won't stop. I told him she was trying to make him feel guilty enough to force me to apologize. He knew, but knowing didn't make it easier. Harper caught me staring at my computer screen during our Tuesday meeting. The budget presentation was open, but I hadn't absorbed a single number. She waited until everyone else left the conference room. You okay? Everything all right at home? I gave her the short version. Mother-in-law sending daily critical videos. Me retaliating by doing the same thing back. Her workplace situation blowing up. Big confrontation that solved nothing. Harper nodded slowly. My mother-in-law and I went through something similar. Took us years to work out. She asked if I'd considered talking to someone professional about it. The stress was clearly affecting my work. I'd missed 2 deadlines last week. Had to redo a client proposal because I'd mixed up their numbers. Harper pulled out her phone, scrolled through her contacts. There's a therapist who helped me and my husband when things got bad with his family. Ivy Griffith. She specializes in family conflict stuff. Harper texted me the contact information. I stared at it. Therapy felt like admitting defeat, like I couldn't handle my own problems. But I'd also just sat through an hour-long meeting without hearing a word anyone said. I called Ivy's office that afternoon. Her receptionist had an opening Thursday at 2. I took it before I could change my mind. Told myself it was just 1 session. Just to get some tools for managing the situation. The guilt about Diane's workplace situation was eating at me. The constant tension with Brett was wearing us both down. I needed to figure out how to move forward without destroying everything. Thursday came too fast. Ivy's office was in a converted house downtown. Comfortable chairs, soft lighting. She was maybe 50. Calm presence that made the room feel safer. I sat down and everything spilled out. The videos starting in January. Brett's dismissals. My blocking her then being forced to unblock. The escalation through February and March. My retaliation campaign. The workplace consequences. The confrontation that changed nothing. Ivy listened without interrupting. Took occasional notes. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked what I wanted to happen next. I didn't know. I just wanted Diane to stop criticizing me, to acknowledge what she'd done was wrong. Ivy nodded. Those were reasonable wants. But I couldn't control whether Diane would ever acknowledge her behavior. I could only control my own actions and boundaries. She pointed out that my retaliation was understandable given months of harassment, but it wasn't sustainable. I couldn't spend my life matching every attack. I needed to focus on protecting myself rather than punishing Diane. That meant clear boundaries and consequences, not escalating warfare. Ivy brought up the workplace situation, asked how I felt about what happened to Diane. I admitted I felt guilty. I'd deliberately exposed her struggles, made her vulnerable at work. Ivy listened. Then she pointed out that Diane's boss had noticed existing performance issues. She'd been hiding her inability to learn new software for months. My posts might have drawn attention to the situation. But the actual consequences came from Diane's own workplace struggles. I'd exposed a vulnerability, but I hadn't created it. We talked about the difference between protecting myself and actively trying to harm someone. My initial retaliation with videos was defensive, showing Brett and Diane how it felt. The workplace stuff crossed into offensive territory, deliberately trying to damage her. Ivy asked if that action had made me feel better. It hadn't. I'd felt powerful for maybe a day. Then just guilty and worried about what I'd started. She suggested that told me something important about what kind of person I wanted to be in this conflict. Brett visited his mother alone on Saturday. He'd been trying to talk to her all week. She'd finally agreed to meet him. Just him. Not me. He was gone for 3 hours. I fed the baby, did laundry, tried not to check my phone every 5 minutes. When Brett came home, his face was tight. How'd it go? Not great. He sat down heavily on the couch. She spent the whole time listing your faults. How you don't keep the house clean enough. How you work too much. How you're not the wife she hoped he'd marry. Every time he tried to redirect the conversation back to her behavior, she'd deflect. Bring up something else I was doing wrong. He'd asked her directly if she understood why the videos were hurtful. She'd said no. She was just trying to help. Trying to make sure her son had a good life. Brett had pointed out that her constant criticism was damaging his marriage. She'd said that wasn't her fault. That was my fault for being too sensitive. For not appreciating guidance from someone with more experience. Brett told me the worst part. He'd asked his mother if she'd apologize to me. She'd refused. Said apologizing would mean admitting she was a bad mother. That everything she'd done for 30 years raising him was wrong. Brett had tried to explain that wasn't what an apology meant. That acknowledging she'd hurt me didn't erase decades of good parenting. That people could make mistakes and still be good overall. She couldn't hear it. Her entire identity was wrapped up in being a good mother. Admitting she'd behaved badly toward me threatened that identity. So she'd rather lose access to her son and grandson than acknowledge she'd done anything wrong. Brett looked exhausted. I asked if he thought she'd ever come around. He didn't know. Maybe. Maybe not. His mother had always been stubborn, but he'd never seen her this defensive before. 2 weeks passed. Diane sent nothing to me. Sent daily guilt trips to Brett. I focused on work. Tried to repair the damage my distraction had caused. Caught up on deadlines. Fixed the client proposal. Attended meetings and actually participated. Then my phone buzzed with a text from Diane. We should move past this for Brett's sake. That was it. No apology. No acknowledgement of what she'd done. Just a suggestion that we pretend nothing happened. I showed Brett. He read it. Sighed. What do you think? I asked if he really expected me to accept this. To just pretend months of harassment never happened. To let his mother back into our lives with no consequences or changes. Brett rubbed his face. I don't know what else to do. She's not going to apologize. This might be the best we get. I told him that wasn't good enough. That accepting this non-apology would teach Diane she could treat me however she wanted with no real consequences. Brett didn't argue, but he didn't agree either. He just looked tired and stuck. My next session with Ivy was Monday. I told her about Diane's text, about Brett's exhaustion, about feeling stuck between accepting terrible treatment and losing Brett's family entirely. Ivy listened. Then she suggested something I hadn't considered. Family mediation. Her husband Neil specialized in exactly these situations. A neutral third party to facilitate communication, help everyone understand each other's perspectives, work toward boundaries everyone could live with. I was skeptical. Diane wouldn't listen to a therapist. She barely listened to her own son. Ivy said people often surprised you in mediation. The structured environment made it harder to deflect or manipulate. And having a professional point out unhealthy patterns carried different weight than family members saying the same things. I told her I'd try it if Brett and Diane were willing, but I wasn't optimistic. Brett agreed immediately when I brought up mediation. He was desperate for any solution that didn't involve choosing between his mother and his wife. I texted Diane, asked if she'd be willing to try family mediation with a professional counselor. Her response came fast. I don't need a stranger telling me how to treat my family. I showed Brett. He called his mother. I could hear her voice through the phone, high and defensive. Brett's voice stayed calm but firm. Mom, we need help working through this. I'm asking you to try mediation. Just a few sessions. If it doesn't help, we'll figure something else out. But I need you to try. Diane said no again. Said she wouldn't be judged by some therapist who didn't know their family, didn't understand their history. Brett took a breath. Then he said something I'd never heard him say to his mother. Mom, if you won't try mediation, I can't let you see us regularly. I need to protect my family. That includes you. But it also includes my wife and son. Mediation is non-negotiable. The phone went quiet. Then Diane's voice came back, smaller. You'd really keep me from my grandson? Brett's hand tightened on the phone. I don't want to. But I will if I have to. We need professional help to fix this. I'm asking you to meet me halfway. Another long silence. Finally, Diane agreed. Her voice was cold. Fine. If that's what it takes. Brett gave her Neil's contact information, told her he'd set up the first session. After he hung up, he sat there staring at his phone. That was the first real boundary he'd ever set with his mother. The first time he'd used leverage. The first time he'd prioritized his wife over keeping his mother comfortable. He looked shaken, but also a little relieved. I asked if he was okay. He nodded slowly, said it felt terrible and necessary at the same time. I understood that feeling completely. The first mediation session was scheduled for Thursday afternoon at Neil's office downtown. Brett drove us there in silence, his hands tight on the steering wheel. Diane's car was already in the parking lot when we arrived. She'd gotten there early, probably to talk to Neil first and set her narrative. We walked into the waiting room and she was sitting there with her purse clutched in her lap, her mouth pressed into a thin line. She didn't look at me. Neil came out and introduced himself, shaking all our hands with the same calm, professional grip. He led us into his office where 3 chairs were arranged in a triangle facing his desk. Diane took the chair farthest from me. Neil started by explaining how mediation worked, his voice steady and neutral. Everyone would get a chance to speak without interruption. We'd take turns. No one could dominate the conversation or talk over anyone else. These were the ground rules and they were non-negotiable. Diane shifted in her chair when he said that, crossing and uncrossing her legs. She wasn't used to being told she couldn't control a conversation. Her fingers drummed against the armrest. Neil asked who wanted to speak first, and Diane's hand shot up before he finished the question. He nodded at her and she launched into her prepared speech. She just wanted to help me be a better wife and mother like she was for Brett's father. She stayed home and kept a beautiful house and cooked 3 meals a day from scratch. She ironed the sheets and organized the closets and made sure her husband never had to worry about anything domestic. That's what wives did in her generation. That's what made marriages work. She was trying to pass on that wisdom to me because she could see I was struggling, working too much, letting things slide at home, not prioritizing my family the way I should. The videos were just helpful suggestions, ways I could improve, be happier, make Brett happier. She said all this like she genuinely believed it, like she couldn't hear how insulting every word sounded. Neil wrote notes on his pad without reacting. When Diane finished, he thanked her for sharing her perspective and asked if I wanted to respond. I took a breath and started talking. Told him about the 12 videos in one day about ironing sheets, about the weight loss videos 4 months postpartum, about the constant criticism of my housekeeping while I was running a company and caring for a newborn. How every single day brought new messages about how I was failing as a wife and mother. How it made me feel worthless and inadequate during the most difficult time of my life. How I started dreading my phone notifications because they were always another attack disguised as help. Diane's face showed genuine confusion while I talked, like she was hearing a completely different story than the one she remembered. She shook her head slightly, her eyebrows pulled together. Neil set down his pen and looked at Diane. He explained that impact matters more than intention. Even well-meaning advice becomes harassment when it's constant and unwanted. When someone tells you to stop and you continue anyway, that's not helping anymore. That's controlling. Diane sat up straighter and argued back. Young women today are too sensitive. They can't handle any guidance or criticism. They think they know everything, but they're making mistakes that could ruin their marriages. Someone needs to tell them the truth. Her generation understood sacrifice and duty. They didn't need constant praise and validation. They just did what needed to be done. Brett finally spoke up, his voice quiet but firm. He told his mother that her old-fashioned views didn't give her the right to criticize me every single day. That her idea of a proper wife wasn't his idea of a proper wife. That he married me because he wanted a partner who challenged him and built a career and had her own ambitions. Not someone who stayed home ironing his sheets. That he was happy with our marriage exactly as it was. Diane turned to look at her son with her mouth slightly open, betrayal written across her face. She'd expected him to support her version of things, Expected him to agree that I needed fixing. Instead, he was taking my side in front of a stranger. Her eyes got watery, but she didn't cry. Just sat there looking wounded and confused. Neil let the silence sit for a moment before speaking again. He gave us homework for the next session. Everyone needed to think about what boundaries would help us move forward. What rules would make it possible for us to have a relationship without constant conflict? He wanted us to write them down and bring them next week. Diane stood up as soon as he finished talking. She grabbed her purse and walked out without saying goodbye to either of us. Didn't even look back. Brett sagged in his chair like someone had cut his strings. He looked completely exhausted, dark circles under his eyes I hadn't noticed before. We thanked Neil and scheduled the follow-up session for the next Thursday. In the car, Brett didn't start the engine right away. He just sat there staring at the dashboard. That was the hardest thing he'd ever had to do. Tell his mother she was wrong in front of someone else. But he knew it needed to happen. The next week, I had 2 sessions with Ivy working on my boundary list. She helped me figure out what I actually needed versus what I just wanted as revenge. No unsolicited advice videos was essential. No comments about my parenting or housekeeping unless I specifically asked for input. No involving Brett in complaints about me instead of talking to me directly. No dropping by without calling first. Those were the big ones. Ivy helped me write them in clear language that didn't sound attacking. We practiced how I'd present them without getting defensive or angry. She reminded me the goal wasn't to punish Diane, but to create a sustainable relationship. Writing everything down made it feel more real and less petty. These weren't unreasonable demands. They were basic respect. Brett worked on his own list at home. He showed it to me Wednesday night, and I was surprised by how thorough it was. He'd written down things I didn't even know bothered him. How his mother would call him at work to complain about me. How she'd compare our marriage to his parents' marriage like theirs was the only correct model. How she made him feel guilty for not visiting more even though he saw her every week. He admitted he'd been taking the path of least resistance for years, agreeing with her to avoid conflict. Not defending me because that would mean confronting her. He didn't realize how much damage that permission was causing. How it made me feel alone in my own marriage. He apologized again, and this time, it felt complete. Thursday came and we went back to Neil's office. Diane was already there again, sitting in the same chair. This time she looked smaller somehow. Less confident. We all sat down and Neil asked us to share our boundary lists. I went first, reading through my points in the calm voice Ivy and I had practiced. Diane's face got tighter with each item. When I finished, she immediately started pushing back. These rules would destroy their family relationship. She wouldn't be able to have a normal grandmother relationship with her grandson if she couldn't give advice. She was being shut out of her son's life. Brett presented his boundaries next, and Diane looked even more upset. She argued that family shouldn't need written rules, that this whole thing was making a simple misunderstanding into a huge problem, that we were overreacting and being cruel. Neil stepped in and asked what was really bothering her. Diane went quiet for a long minute, staring at her hands. Then she said something I didn't expect. She was scared of becoming useless to Brett's life. She'd spent 30 years being the most important woman in his world, teaching him things, taking care of him, being needed. Now he was married and had his own family, and she didn't know what her role was supposed to be. If she couldn't give advice or help with the house or guide us, what was left? The vulnerability in her voice shifted something in the room. Brett's face softened. He moved his chair closer to his mother's and told her that having boundaries didn't mean cutting her out. It meant creating a healthier relationship where everyone felt respected. She could still be his mother, still be a grandmother, still be part of our lives, just in a different way than she'd imagined. Diane nodded slowly but didn't look convinced. Neil suggested we all agree to try the boundaries for 3 months and then reassess. See if things actually improved or if adjustments were needed. Diane finally agreed, her voice small and tired. We all signed a copy of the boundary agreement Neil had typed up. It felt strange and formal, but also necessary. Like we were creating a new foundation to build on. The first week after signing the agreement felt strange. No videos appeared on my phone, no comments about my housekeeping. Diane came to Sunday dinner and actually asked about my work projects instead of criticizing them. She talked about her own job stress with the new software system. She mentioned a book she was reading. She played with the baby without once suggesting I was doing something wrong. Brett kept glancing between us like he expected an explosion that never came. I caught myself waiting for the other shoe to drop. Week 2 was more of the same. Diane brought dessert to dinner without commenting on my cooking. She asked if I needed anything from the store when she went shopping. She showed me pictures from her friend's birthday party. Normal grandmother things, normal mother-in-law things. I started to relax a tiny bit. Maybe this could actually work. Then my phone buzzed during a work meeting. Video notification from Diane. My stomach dropped. I opened it later in my office. Baby organization hacks. Little plastic bins for all the supplies. Color-coded labels. The comment said just thought this was interesting. My hands shook as I typed back. Per our agreement, I'd prefer you not share videos. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again, then my phone started ringing. Brett's number. I let it go to voicemail. Listened to the message 5 minutes later. His voice was tight. Mom's upset. Says you're being unreasonable about one innocent video. She was just trying to help. Can you please just let this one go? It's such a small thing. The old pattern trying to reassert itself. I texted back instead of calling. She agreed to boundaries. This violates them. Not negotiable. Brett called again. I didn't answer. He texted. She's crying. Says she can't do anything right. Says you're making her walk on eggshells. I felt the familiar guilt trying to creep in. Pushed it away. Texted back. She signed an agreement. First violation in 2 weeks. Boundary stands. My phone stayed quiet for 20 minutes. Then Brett texted. Told her she needs to respect the boundaries. She's not happy. I exhaled slowly. Typed back. Thank you. That must have been hard. His response came fast. Yeah. She hung up on me. The next 4 days were silent. No texts from Diane, no calls. Brett mentioned she wasn't answering when he tried to check on her. He got quiet and withdrawn. Picked at his dinner. Checked his phone constantly. I could see the stress eating at him. The lifetime of conditioning that made his mother's approval feel necessary for survival. But he didn't ask me to apologize. Didn't suggest I reach out first. Just dealt with his own discomfort without making it my problem. On day 5, Diane texted Brett about something unrelated. Casual question about his work schedule. No mention of the video or the boundary. Brett relaxed visibly when he saw it. Sunday dinner came and Diane showed up exactly on time. She greeted Brett warmly. Picked up the baby and cooed at him. Talked to Brett about his week. I might as well have been furniture. She answered when I spoke directly to her. Short, polite responses. Then turned back to Brett. It wasn't hostile exactly, just cold. Like I was a roommate she tolerated rather than family. Brett noticed. Kept trying to pull me into conversations. Diane would give minimal responses and redirect to him. After she left, Brett apologized. Said she was being childish. I told him it was fine. Better than constant criticism. At least this I could handle. My next session with Ivy, I told her about the cold shoulder treatment. She asked how it made me feel. Frustrated. Like I'm being punished for having boundaries, but also relieved that at least she's not attacking me. Ivy nodded. You can't control whether she likes you. Only whether you allow her to mistreat you. The goal isn't a warm relationship. It's a functional one with mutual respect. Sometimes that's the best you can get. I thought about that a lot over the next few weeks. Diane stayed cool but polite. The boundaries held. No more videos, no more criticism, just distant civility. At work, Harper stopped by my office with coffee. You seem less stressed lately. Everything okay with the mother-in-law situation? I gave her the short version. Mediation. Written boundaries. Diane following them but giving me the cold shoulder. Harper laughed. Took me 5 years to get to that point with my in-laws. You're doing better than most. 3 months after we signed the agreement, Neil scheduled a check-in session. We all sat in his office again. Same chairs, same tense atmosphere. Neil asked Diane how the boundaries were working for her. She took a long breath. Harder than I expected. I have to stop myself from sharing things constantly. From giving advice when I see something that could be done better. It goes against every instinct I have as a mother. Neil looked at her and asked if she understood why the constant videos had been hurtful. Diane took a deep breath. She said something about respecting different parenting styles and how everyone raises their children differently. The words sounded practiced, like she'd written them down and memorized them. But it was something. 3 months ago, she'd been completely denying she did anything wrong. Now she at least acknowledged there were different ways to do things. I watched her face as she spoke. She believed what she was saying. Sort of. Enough to say it out loud anyway. Neil nodded and turned to me. Asked how I felt about Diane's progress with the boundaries. I told him Diane had mostly followed them. Family dinners had been more pleasant without the constant criticism hanging over everything. Diane's eyes widened slightly, like she expected me to find new things to complain about, to list all the small ways she'd failed. I could see her shoulders tense waiting for it, but I didn't have a list. Things actually had been better. Not perfect, not warm, but better. She looked genuinely surprised by the positive feedback, maybe even a little relieved. Brett spoke up next. Said he felt less caught in the middle now that there were clear expectations. He'd enjoyed having more relaxed conversations with his mother lately. Conversations that weren't focused on my perceived failures as a wife and mother. Diane's face changed when he said that. Something clicked. Her criticism of me had been poisoning her relationship with her son. All those videos and comments had pushed him away instead of bringing them closer. She sat very still processing this, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Neil asked what we wanted moving forward. Brett and I had talked about this already. We agreed to continue the boundaries without an end date. They could be adjusted if everyone agreed to the changes. Diane asked if eventually we could be closer once enough time passed. Her voice was quiet, almost vulnerable. I told her honestly that it depended on whether the respect continued. If she could maintain boundaries long term. If she could see me as a person instead of a project to fix. Diane nodded slowly. Didn't argue. Didn't make excuses. After the session ended, we walked out to the parking lot together. Diane asked if she could hold the baby for a while. I handed him over without the usual anxiety twisting in my stomach, without mentally preparing for whatever criticism might follow. She took him and cooed at him, made silly faces, talked to him in that high-pitched voice people use with babies, didn't say one word about his outfit, didn't mention his feeding schedule or sleep routine, didn't compare him to how Brett was at this age, just enjoyed her grandson. It felt like a real victory. Small but significant. Over the next month, Diane settled into the new normal. Our relationship stayed somewhat distant and formal. She was polite at family dinners, asked about work without suggesting I should quit, talked about her own life more. Occasionally, she'd share actually helpful information when I specifically asked for advice about something, but she waited to be asked now. Didn't volunteer unsolicited opinions about everything I did wrong. The dinners became almost comfortable. Brett looked more relaxed at them, less tense waiting for conflict. Diane's workplace situation got better too. She took a technology training course her boss recommended, learned the new software she'd been struggling with, stopped bringing up my role and exposing her struggles. I still felt some guilt about that whole situation, about tagging her boss in those articles about older workers. But I recognized it wasn't entirely my fault either. She had been hiding her technology problems for months. I just brought existing issues to light. The guilt sat there in the background, but didn't consume me anymore. Brett and I developed a better system for handling his mother. After each family dinner, we'd check in with each other, discuss any boundary concerns before they built up into resentment, talk about small things when they were still small. This prevented the pattern from before where I felt unheard and was ignored until I exploded. Brett got better at listening, at taking my concerns seriously instead of dismissing them, at seeing his mother's behavior more clearly. The communication between us improved dramatically. We felt like a team again instead of opponents. I gradually reduced my therapy sessions with Ivy from weekly to monthly. The family situation had become more manageable, less crisis and more maintenance. Ivy reminded me during our last weekly session that boundaries need consistent upkeep, that I shouldn't feel guilty about enforcing them when necessary. That maintaining boundaries wasn't mean or petty. It was healthy. Self-preservation. She told me I could always come back to weekly sessions if things got difficult again. But for now, monthly check-ins seemed appropriate. 5 months after the initial confrontation, Diane brought something up at family dinner. She'd been thinking about how she was raised. Very strict rules about women's roles, about what wives and mothers were supposed to do and be. Maybe those ideas didn't fit modern families. Maybe her mother's way wasn't the only right way. It wasn't a full apology, wasn't a complete acknowledgement of everything she'd done wrong, but it showed some self-reflection, some willingness to question beliefs she'd held her entire life. Brett and I exchanged glances across the table. This was progress, real progress, more than we'd expected. Brett started meeting his mom for lunch every other week, just the two of them at different restaurants around town. No agenda about our household or my shortcomings. They talked about her hobbies instead. She'd taken up pottery classes after work, started volunteering at the animal shelter on weekends. Brett came home from these lunches looking lighter somehow. Told me about Diane's stories from her job, about the difficult coworker she'd been dealing with, about her plans to visit her sister next month. Normal mother and son conversations that didn't revolve around fixing me. I realized one Thursday afternoon that I hadn't checked my phone anxiously in weeks. No dread about incoming videos, no stomach tightness when notifications appeared. Family dinners felt manageable now instead of exhausting. I could sit at Diane's table without my shoulders tensing up, without mentally preparing for criticism about the casserole I brought or my outfit choice or how I was holding the baby. The absence of that constant pressure changed everything, made me breathe easier around her, made me actually listen when she talked instead of waiting for the next attack. Diane brought it up at dinner one night, asked if Brett and I ever got date nights anymore, said she knew how hard it was with a baby, offered to babysit occasionally if we wanted. Brett and I exchanged glances across the table. We discussed it later that night after putting the baby down. Agreed to try short visits with specific pickup times. No overnights yet. Clear boundaries about feeding schedules and bedtime routines. The first babysitting session was 2 weeks later. We went to dinner and a movie. Kept our phones on the table the whole time. Checked them every 20 minutes. But Diane didn't call or text with problems. When we got home, she was rocking the baby in the living room. He was calm and fed and happy. She handed him over without commentary. Didn't mention anything about how we should be doing things differently. Just said she had a nice time with her grandson. We thanked her and she left. No drama, no boundary violations, no videos sent the next day about proper parenting techniques. Just a normal grandmother babysitting experience. Carol showed up at the next family dinner. Diane's friend from church, who I'd tagged in all those videos months ago. She hugged Diane and commented on how much happier she seemed lately. Said she'd been worried about her stress levels earlier this year. Diane admitted the workplace situation had been a wake-up call. That she'd been so focused on everyone else's lives that she forgot to actually live her own. Carol squeezed her hand and said she was proud of her friend for making changes. I felt a weird mix of guilt and satisfaction hearing this. Guilt because I'd deliberately exposed Diane's struggles. Satisfaction because maybe it actually helped her in some twisted way. Brett pulled me aside after dinner while Diane was saying goodbye to Carol. Told me he was grateful I stood up to his mom even though my methods were harsh. Said it forced him to see patterns he'd been ignoring his whole life. Patterns where he prioritized keeping his mother happy over supporting his wife. Where he dismissed my feelings because confronting her seemed too hard. He admitted he was raised to believe keeping his mother happy was his primary job as a son. That her emotional state was somehow his responsibility to manage. He was learning that wasn't healthy for anyone. I told Brett my revenge campaign was petty, that I could have handled things more maturely. But I didn't regret forcing the confrontation because nothing else was working. He'd ignored me for months while I suffered through daily harassment. Sometimes you have to fight fire with fire to make people notice the flames. We agreed we were both learning better ways to communicate, better ways to set boundaries and respect them, better ways to be a team instead of opponents. 6 months passed since we first established boundaries with Diane. Our relationship stayed somewhat cool but functional. She knew the rules now, knew the consequences if she crossed them. She slipped up occasionally, sent a video about meal planning or shared an article about working mothers. But she caught herself quickly when reminded, apologized without the dramatic tears and guilt trips. The boundaries held because we enforced them consistently. Diane surprised me one afternoon with a text. Asked if I wanted to get coffee sometime. Just the two of us. Said she'd like to get to know me better outside family obligations. I stared at the message for a while. Showed it to Brett, who looked equally shocked. I was skeptical about the whole thing. Wondered if this was some new strategy to get around the boundaries. But I was also curious. Curious if we could build any kind of real connection. We met at a coffee shop the following Saturday. The conversation was awkward at first. Long pauses where we both sipped our drinks. But Diane asked about my work. Actually listened to my answers instead of interrupting with criticism or suggestions. She shared stories about her own career struggles, about being one of the few women in her department when she started, about dealing with bosses who didn't take her seriously. I saw glimpses of an actual person behind the critical mother-in-law mask, someone with her own frustrations and dreams and disappointments. We didn't become best friends over coffee, didn't suddenly have this warm bonding moment, but it was civil, almost pleasant, a start toward something resembling mutual respect. I didn't expect Diane and I would ever be close. Probably wouldn't call each other just to chat or go shopping together, but maintaining a respectful relationship where she saw me as a full person felt achievable now. Not just her son's wife who needed constant correction, not just the daughter-in-law who didn't measure up to her standards, but an actual individual with my own life and career and valid choices. That felt like enough. A few weeks after our coffee meeting, Brett mentioned something while we were cleaning up after dinner. He said family gatherings felt lighter now. Different. Like he wasn't constantly waiting for his mother to say something critical about me or our house or how we were raising the baby. He stopped loading the dishwasher and looked at me. Said he was grateful I pushed for change even when it got ugly. That he understood now why I had to fight back the way I did. The short-term conflict led to something better for all of us. I told him I appreciated hearing that. It helped knowing he finally saw what I'd been dealing with all those months. We finished the dishes together without saying much else, but it felt comfortable. Like we were actually on the same team now instead of opponents trying to keep his mother happy. The baby started saying his first words around that time. Mama and Dada and something that sounded like ball. We had Diane over for dinner the night he said Dada 3 times in a row. She clapped her hands and got down on the floor with him, made silly faces until he laughed and tried to say it again. No comments about how Brett talked earlier at this age, no suggestions about speech development or baby sign language. She just enjoyed watching her grandson figure out words. Brett caught my eye across the room and smiled. This version of his mother felt like someone we could actually have in our lives. Someone who could be a grandmother without turning every moment into a lesson or competition. I realized later that week while folding laundry that our situation would never be perfect. Diane and I would probably never be close. She'd slip up sometimes and send a video or make a comment about something I was doing wrong. But we'd built something that worked, a family setup where everyone's boundaries got respected most of the time. Where conflicts got handled through actual conversations instead of passive-aggressive videos and social media campaigns. That felt like winning even if it wasn't some fairy tale ending where we all loved each other. We could exist together without constant tension. That was enough. The holidays approached faster than I expected. Halloween decorations went up in the neighborhood and stores started playing Christmas music. I caught myself actually looking forward to Thanksgiving dinner with Diane instead of dreading it. We had tools now. Clear boundaries everyone understood. Ways to handle problems if they came up. Brett and I were stronger together after fighting through all this. Our relationship with Diane was stable and respectful, even if it wasn't warm. Life felt genuinely better. Not perfect, but better. And that was more than I'd hoped for back in March when I was drowning in passive-aggressive TikToks about being a proper wife.